Hello, everybody. I see a question in the chat already. I guess me being here answers it. It says, "Did Lewis make it home safe?" Here's your answer. I am not a clone. Hi, how are you doing? All right, welcome. I'm so happy to have everybody here. This is Screw Big Gov and SBG News and Views. Today would be more views than news. I'm very excited about our guest, but before we get to her, please do us a favor and like, follow, and subscribe. And yes, you Rumbleites, I know it's so annoying. You get unsubscribed and then you have to resubscribe. We don't know what's going on there, but we do know how we get attacked on every possible plane of existence we know. But it's okay. It just means we're over the target. So, that being said, go to screwbiggov.com. Screwbiggov.com. Oh man, suddenly I got an accent. So go to screwbiggov.com. I don't know where that came from all of a sudden. And right there you'll see the Screw Big Gov newsletter. Why is that so important? Because as you know, we're shadow banned all over the place. We've got challenges, and we've been taken off of several platforms. So what happens is, if you're part of the newsletter, you not only know what's coming up, what's exciting, what will happen in the future on some of our stuff, but you will be able to find us if for some reason we get taken down. And at the top of the website, you also see links to all our social media, because as you probably know by now, if you go search for them, you can't find them in many cases. That's okay. That's how we overcame that. And you know, by now, we've done over 20 films, and you can find those 20 films on screwbiggov.com also, and get yourself some cool swag. So, that being said, I am very excited about our guests. As you know, we have survivors on our guests. Two of my favorites would be Kathy O'Brien and Laura Worley. And today, I think it's based on her history and story. We can definitely add her to this list of mega survivors. Pretty incredible story. We're going to get to it, and I believe we're going to dive into the entertainment business. And this nice, wonderful lady will probably name names, which is what you guys always ask for, I know. So maybe she'll be here for you for that. Let me introduce to you mega survivor Casey Sunshine. Hi, Casey.
Thank you so much, Lewis, for having me. Yes, um, I met Lewis at the Truth Tour, San Diego. I was invited by Carrie Cassidy, and we interviewed her on Awake Nation. I was an associate producer for a short time on Awake Nation. I have been a rabbit hole junkie for the last 4 years, and this is after 29 years of providing free support to survivors. So I'm willing and ready to go into there and some names. But I want you to know that, I've been naming names my whole life. I'm 59 years old. I have 5 sons and 2 grandsons. And I've been naming names, and nobody believed me. And so it's really been fun. I mean, kind of a sick way. Fun to just get the validation, to see so much of what I've been saying my entire childhood, my entire adulthood, where people are saying, listen, we don't want to talk about Satanists or the Luciferian agenda in Hollywood. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll talk about the weather. I'll talk about just about anything else. But it just finally got to the point 4 years ago when I said, no more silence in the general public. Like, I've been talking to my survivors for 29 years. We talk about everything. And what I have found in working with these survivors is that some people need years and years in recovery, but survivors, sometimes all they need is 30 seconds of another survivor telling their story. And when they just go, oh my gosh, I can finally speak. Someone has been saying, someone else besides me is exposing the horrors that I've experienced in childhood. Because what they did is they attacked us individually, and it was so outrageous and so horrific what they did to us that most of us just went home in silence and pretty much sucked our proverbial thumb alone, going, I'm all alone in this. And so for 29 years, I've been letting people know that they are not alone. But right now, it's like the whole world's waking up, and I've been doing just interview after interview, and it's been a beautiful wonderful thing to expose all of this evil.
It definitely does feel like the whole world is waking up, which is great, and thanks to people like you that have been involved in that. Um, let's, if we can do a synopsis real quick of your journey of what happened from childhood until you broke out of, let's say, the system, the cabal system, so people have an understanding because you truly are a survivor. I've seen the interviews and it's absolutely incredible. And then from there we'll get into some specifics.
Well, I started in this Luciferian agenda at 6 months of age. So when my mom was about 16 years old, she was identified probably by the cabal, but she was picked up by the Kansas City Mafia, the Sevilla family. And they paved her way out of Kansas City right into Hollywood. So my brother was born. He's almost exactly a year older than me. He's a professional comedian in Hollywood for 39 years now. So he followed my mom's footsteps into Hollywood. And so he and I really went separate paths, even though I will love him with my last breath and pray with everything that I have that he will escape this trap that he has stepped into. So I was 6 months old, and he was 18 months old when our dad left us, and then our mom put us on a plane, dropped us off in Kansas City with her abusive parents, knowing full well that they were horrifically, especially her mom, was wicked mean. And she was controlled by and encouraged by the Kansas City Mafia. They had paved the way for her to have some really nice gigs out here in Hollywood. So my brother was born in Anaheim. I was born in Orange. And so they dropped me off and with my brother in Kansas City when I was only 6 months old. So my evil grandmother, who people have asked me, was she a Satanist? No, she was a religious fanatic who watched the 700 Club 24/7. And so they captured her essentially through the corrupt elements of the religious fanatics. So she was watching the 700 Club, and I won't name specific names, but I may a little bit later attach some idea of who I'm talking about. But I'm really careful because I don't want to get anybody sued because they're still around. So my grandmother was performing horrific acts on me as an infant. So my memories really are, I have some memories before the age of 3. She was performing horrible things. My brother and I would go in for the bubble bath, which he got to enjoy. But I was taken out of the bathtub. My vagina was rubbed raw. And my grandmother did perform douches and enemas on me, and just fanatically told me that my vagina was dirty and that my mother had gone off to put lipstick on and wear a short skirt, and she'd followed Satan into Hollywood. Now, the funny part about that, and you'll notice that despite the fact that I have all of these horrific things that happen to me, that I do find within the horror the ability to laugh, because I sit at the feet of Christ in absolute service to God's children. And at a certain point, I have to praise God for everything that I went through, because I know it made me stronger. It turned me into a very powerful individual that just I don't take crap off of people, and I stand up for my survivors. So I have a mama bear mentality over not just by my 5 sons and my 2 grandsons, but my survivors of 29 years. It's free, the support that I offer my survivors, because we need each other. And so, yes, I am very familiar with Kathy O'Brien's story and several other survivors that experience much more horrors than I did. I count myself lucky. Having been gone through my childhood, I went in very high-end events. So the first one that I really have a really strong memory of is at the Muscular Dystrophy Telethon in Las Vegas with Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin, and Frank Sinatra. And of course, when I came home from the Muscular Dystrophy Telethons while performing on television with my mother, like the Partridge Family and my brother, everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, you got to meet all these rich and famous people." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, Dean Martin kept sticking his tongue in my mouth, and he kept putting his hands between my legs and would hold me on his lap and slobber on me, and it was really disgusting. And so I would come home to Kansas City, and everybody wanted to hear these stories about the rich and famous, and I wasn't saying what they wanted to hear. And so they said, oh, well, that's not possible. That's just not possible. So it was just recently that I discovered an FBI file that exposes that the Rat Pack, including Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Jerry Lewis, were...
Yeah, I discovered first Sammy Davis Jr. was years ago, and then when you kind of reverse engineer it, you find, of course, all of them are. In regards to that day on Jerry Lewis, I guess it was his muscular dystrophy truth-a-thon, not truth-a-thon, his a-thon, whatever it is.
It's the Labor Day telethon, MDA telethon, yeah.
MDA, that's what it is. Thank you. On that day, how old were you when Dean Martin was doing what he was doing?
I was only 7 or 8 years old, but I have to tell you that I was exposed to him several years in a row. So we went, and for those of you who are not familiar with that, Jerry Lewis stays awake for like every Labor Day for about 3 days, and Jerry Lewis stays, he's very funny, but Dean Martin pretty much stays drunk the entire time, and they bring in local talent. So my mother sang My Way with Frank Sinatra, and what I remembered as a child was that Frank Sinatra was very touchy-feely with my mom in a way that I did not like. And I also noticed that Frank Sinatra was that way with my mother, and he was much too old for her. As a child, I remember thinking that. But yeah, it didn't surprise me when I recently found the FBI file on Frank Sinatra, who attended my godfather's. I was betrothed to the Kansas City Mafia godfather's son, and I was not at all surprised to find out that he was directly tied to, as a CIA asset, directly responsible for bringing the Italian Mafia and the Jewish Mafia into the Hollywood satanic Luciferian agenda without them realizing that they were directly tied to the CIA.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for bringing that up, because people don't understand the CIA entertainment correlation, and it's so what we have learned, and you can corroborate this or tell me if I'm on the wrong track, is what we have learned is there's a lot of talent in entertainment, music, Hollywood, so on and so forth, and sometimes they're approached before they get any fame, but many times if they start to get traction, then they need to make the deal, or they're gonna be completely taken out or compromised, and that seems to be the thing. And part of it is exactly the same thing as Epstein does, and it's all about getting people in a compromised position. Therefore, you can control them, and if you cannot compromise them.
Yeah, of course, as a child I had no idea, but when you look back on it, I was coming forth with all these stories, and then all of them lined up. So like, oh, all of my crazy stories that never changed. People would say that. They're just like, okay, she keeps telling this story, and it's not changing, decade over decade over decade. So what essentially happened is that the Kansas City Mafia, they facilitated my mother getting all of these amazing gigs, and she was wildly talented. However, at some point, she really wanted to, she did not have the maternal instincts, and she had an addictive chemistry. She wanted nothing more than to be rich and famous, so they had her by, the short hairs. And so she had tried to make that deal, I suspect, when she wanted to come back to Kansas City and be able to, she was still going to travel, but she wanted to have a home base in Kansas City and get married to a guy that was that had mafia ties. He worked for General Motors, and when he and my mom got married, he actually came to us and said, "Look, I don't like kids. You stay out of my way, I'll stay out of your way." So, like, being a child that grew up without parents who loved to say, "We are going to take care of you." So when I became a mafia goddaughter, right about the time they arrested Nick Sevilla, so they took all of these people that were running the country from these mafia families, and they started arresting them for white-collar crimes. When that happened, the River Key, which is like in Kansas City, Kansas is on one side, the Missouri, or the river's right in between, so Kansas City is actually partly in Kansas, partly in Missouri, And the mafia ran the River Key. And so my mom, she wanted to be able to really work the River Key and not travel so much. And when she made that deal, they right about that time is when they arrested Nick Sevilla, threw him in prison for some white collar crime. Carmen Sevilla, who was my godfather, we called him Butch Sevilla. He stepped up to take over. I became a mafia goddaughter. I was betrothed to his son, and not. I thought it was a little weird that my godmother didn't take his last name, and neither did my boyfriend. But it was understood that we would be married, that I was being groomed to be a mafia wife, and also to accept that my husband would have multiple women on the side. That's how it worked. There would be a lot of restaurant ownership. But my mother stepped into that trap, and when she did, she moved back to Kansas City, and that's right about the time the River Key collapsed because they arrested Nick Sevilla. And so they kind of changed their plan, and I ended up being exposed to some really horrific things as a mafia goddaughter. And I think that was kind of priming me to see if I was the material that could keep the secrets for the family.
And Casey, how old were you at that time?
I was 11.
Wow, and they were up front. Literally, this is going to be your path. Is that right?
It was so upfront that I had to go to, I had to become a Catholic. I ended up attending a Jesuit college. I was even invited to join the Knights Templar as a female, which is unheard of.
Yep.
A lot of things were arranged for me along that way, but it was so upfront that my brother was actually married off when he was 12 in a mock wedding. So yeah, they're very serious about how that works.
And if I hope I'm not stepping over the line, but it sounds like your mom knew what was going on with Dean Martin and the MDA, and clearly knew what was going on with the mafia, the Kansas City Mafia. Is that right?
Well, I believe that she did, and I'll tell you why. So I had a babysitting gig with Nate Archibald, who was with the Kansas City Kings. So here I am, 11-year-old, working, babysitting for, big guy who was connected, and my mafia family was very connected to the Chiefs, the Kings, and the Royals. Kansas City Royals. But that was, the Kings have moved all over by now, but back then they were in Kansas City. And I was delivering newspapers to Little Italy. They wanted somebody connected, so you pick up the newspapers 2 a.m., deliver them, make sure they're delivered before 6 a.m. And my mother was an alcoholic and addicted to Valium, so she would almost never get out of bed, and she was very abusive. I called her Mommy Dearest. All of my extended family knew she was very abusive. But one night she decided she was going to take me on my newspaper route, which never happened, ever. I had this guy in a station wagon that used to drive me around, and it was dead of winter, February of 1977. My mom was working regularly in conformity to her deal that she made with them. She was a regular at a restaurant called Cascone's. So she still had gigs all over the country, but she got to be a regular there, so she could somewhat pretend to be a mom and a married woman. And so all of a sudden she gets a phone call, and she goes on my newspaper route with me. And that just happened to be the night that Johnny Amaro, who we call Johnny Green, because that's not uncommon. They have, Butch Sevilla, Johnny Green. They all have nicknames. We call it Corky. All of the names of the family members, the nicknames. And here I am delivering the newspaper, and that I knew and loved.
At 11.
At 11.
So
Maybe 12. Right about 11, 12.
Yeah, right. Okay, but if for the youth that are thinking that's crazy, this is part of the grooming ritual that a lot of these. Now I don't know if the KC mob was satanic at the time, but this is part of the ritual in order to compromise somebody and also kind of groom you and say, is she going to be able to handle this? You know what I mean? Is that what you felt like was going on, looking back at it?
Absolutely. I was immediately expected. I'm on the scene. Johnny Amaro, who I only knew him as Johnny Green. Okay, so there's Nick Sevilla's house, and a few doors down, I know everybody who lives there. On Sundays, we're having family meals that were, a cohesive family connection where Butch Sevilla, I loved him dearly, and I honestly don't think that any of the mafias were really satanic. I think they established their organized crime families to combat the corrupt governments. Because the only time in my childhood that I actually had protection was when I was a mafia goddaughter. So there was nobody objectifying me, nobody touching me, nobody slipping me the tongue or sticking their hands between my legs. I was well protected, and I think, and I never saw any young girls being objectified after I became a goddaughter, and we stopped going to the Mason lodges.
Yeah, and I've heard this often. This is fascinating. I'm so glad you're telling this. Is that I've heard a lot of the mob, not just the Kansas City mob, were fairly sovereign type individuals, and they didn't want any government intrusion whatsoever. Now, of course, their tactics are not something that's somebody, a godly person, would use, obviously, but they're fairly aligned, and this is shocking. They're fairly aligned with what we would call patriots today, with their political views of how things should roll, and I think that's where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's taken me years to kind of wrap my mind around this, but I am a child of God. I did really submit my life to Christ, and they targeted me. The Satanists targeted me because I have a rare eye condition called central heterochromia that affects only 1% of the population. So I could sing, I could dance, and quite well. My mother had me singing at the age of 3, listening to Dionne Warwick and Aretha Franklin. So I was I was groomed to be a power singer. So when I would sing on these stages, I was singing Jesus Christ Superstar. I don't know how to love him. So they were very much objectifying me, having me sing about all the men that I'd had before, talking about how I could seduce Jesus, and that was in the satanic Hollywood scene and the Mason lodges. But when I came back into the Italian mafia family, I was doing gigs at beautiful restaurants, beautiful Italian restaurants, and nobody made me sing those songs. I got to sing Delta Dawn. I got to sing, you know, we sang Proud Mary as a family, and my mother, I don't mind saying, was amazingly talented in singing that. So this is the difference of what I witnessed with my mafia family. I believe that they were devout Catholics. They love children. They protect children. They would, and then his brother-in-law later taught him how to become a peeping Tom. So there was all kinds of satanic rituals that he was no doubt subjected to, and then the media actively hid that in all of the documentaries. So I just recently went back and did a deep dive on that to show that he was a satanic ritual abuse survivor, no question, and he was subjected to the, so my mom and he were sent to the Hollywood Psychiatric Center to do electroshock therapy.
Right. Otherwise known everybody as MK Ultra.
Yes,
So
and I have to add, my last name is Emery, spelled Emery, and the form of muscular dystrophy that I have is Emery Dreyfus muscular dystrophy, identified by Dr. Emery, who I believe is still alive, and I was attending the muscular dystrophy telethons as a child. So those are just, some wild, bizarre. I'm sure they have nothing.
No, this is interesting because I wanted to step back to that. It sounds as if that this wasn't just a random disease. It was almost. It seems like. Do you believe that you and your siblings were given muscular dystrophy?
Let me put it this way. Okay, the chances of me having, so I have 5 pregnancies, 5 births, all male, and no miscarriages, no abortions. So the chances of that happening, you can Google it, 3% chance of that happening. I have central heterochromia where I have 4 different color bursts in my eye. The chances of that, only 1% of the population, a lot of them are in Hollywood, have this extremely rare eye condition. Who was 19 when I was 14, and that's when we went to Youth for Christ camp. I gave my life to Christ, and I've been serving Christ since July 17th, 1979. And yes, the discernment that I have with the evil that I have witnessed without any multiple personality issues whatsoever. Now, my mother was diagnosed multiple personality disorder, which is now known as DID.
Hmm.
but I never was. All of my memories were retained and never faltered, not even a little bit.
Well, and many times, like multiple personalities come first with the psychotic break, and therefore it turns out it's an actual coping mechanism why people end up with multiple personalities. Often, not always. So when those two predators got to you when you were 14, is it, do you feel like they almost waited, and then when the mob wasn't involved anymore with the protection, they they were not afraid anymore to because they sound like predators, which predators they will literally lie in wait until they can take opportunity to do the bad thing. What's your feeling on that?
My feeling is that my mother generated an environment in which my brother and I were completely raising ourselves, not safe. We had no protection whatsoever. And so when we lost the mafia protection, the same predator who violently sodomized me at 14 had been the perpetrator who sodomized my brother from the ages with me and finished with my brother, and did this on a regular basis because my mother was either drunk on pills or just didn't care that she had two children that she should have been taking care of.
Wow, wow. Okay, so moving forward, I know you've had a lot of interactions in, I believe, music, and Hollywood, right? Can you tell us what that looks for? That sounds like that would be the late teens, early 20s moving forward. Is that right?
Yeah, I was always entertaining with my mom. So, like I said, we were kind of like the Partridge Family. So, when available, so we'd go on the road with her. I pretty much performed in every state, and I think besides the Dakotas or something. So we were always all over the place, and doing different gigs. And as I mentioned, when I was under mafia protection, we stopped doing gigs that were in the Freemason lodges, which was really nice for me because a lot of the rich and famous people at the Freemason lodges, there's the party with the families, and then there's the after party, and that's when the drunks start molesting the kids. And I was always there because my mom, would work till 2 or 3 in the morning. But so in that construct, I my brother and I would sing. And of course, you put two kids on a stage, and we would just bring down the house. My mother was wildly talented, but put two kids up there that can sing as well. So we got to miss a lot of school. We were just kind of famous when we would return to Kansas City. Oh, tell me all about your experiences, and they were shocked when my experiences were not good, and I really didn't enjoy that whole scenario because of what I went through. But my brother, he had a totally different reaction because our uncle was the only one that was molesting him. And so I went through that singing continually with my mom, and then on her gigs, and then in churches, and I became in the family. I was the one that sang at all the weddings and funerals. So it was just kind of how it went. And then later on, I became one of the lead singers at a mega church in Orlando when I was raising my sons. So I've been singing throughout my life, singing and dancing, but I really got picked up in the GATE program in first grade. That's the Gifted and Talented Education, where they tested me, they identified me as central heterochromia, and then they began to keep track of me everywhere I went.
Yeah.
So it was organized.
I'm familiar with Gate. I can't say I was lucky enough to be in Gate. I was in Gate. And then my mom, based on some issues with some teachers, literally ended up pulling me out and saying I don't want him involved in that anymore. It was weird also. I don't know if it happened to you, but when you're in the GATE program, at least in mine, is you're watched a little bit more. And it's now I didn't know what that meant then. Looking back, it's almost another type of deal where they're looking for certain talent that they want to.
And Gilbert Gottfried, and all of these individuals. I met Jerry Seinfeld, but he seemed to be a nice gentleman. He never did anything inappropriate. So I'll just say who I encountered who did not do anything appropriate was Evel Knievel and Seinfeld, and Sam Kinison, Rosie O'Donnell, all of them in the club.
Yeah, and here's the challenge though. Even the people that didn't knew about it. Great example. Somebody that I really admired for a long time was Ronald Reagan, and I know Kathy O'Brien said Ronald Reagan was there. She said he was very sweet to her and didn't ever do anything, but he 100% had to know what's going on, which The biggest challenge I see is the people not saying anything is what perpetuates this problem. And I know they're under threat and so on and so forth. So I get that, but there has to come a time where there's a it's more godly to put the word out there than just to protect yourself or protect your family. Are you familiar with the mansion in Beverly Hills nicknamed Green Acres?
I've heard stories about it, but I've never been there, and I've never interviewed anybody who identified it specifically. Mostly they're attached homes to Hugh Hefner and the Getty Museum. That's
Okay.
what I've seen most.
Okay, here you go. So this will be fun for you. So I was I spent 2 weeks at Green Acres. God puts me in the weirdest positions. It's just odd. I was a troubleshooter for drains and plumbing. That's what I did. Was working with the largest commercial drain cleaning company in California, and the new owner of what's called Green Acres requested me and my buddy, because we were the top of the top in the company, to go there and assess the complete property because he wanted to find out what problems there was so he could devalue his final or get credit back on whatever he paid on it in the moment. So this was the most expensive house in Beverly Hills by far at the time. Madonna's house was right next door. So we went to do the plumbing, and as my wife says, we were traviesos, which means we were very mischievous. So at the time, this was, gosh, this had to be 30, more than 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago. Anyways, we were very, very mischievous, and we found out a couple things, but what happened is he had security all around this property constantly, even though it wasn't even occupied. This is just for when the contractors are coming and looking at stuff. So it took us 2 weeks to finish what we needed to finish there after the first few days because security would follow us everywhere. It was very odd. Now remember, we were naive. We didn't know anything at the time. Security would follow us everywhere. Well, what happened is finally I called the owner of the place, which is Ron Burkle, which you probably have heard that disgusting name before. And at the time, he just owned grocery stores, but I found out the reason why he bought this house is because of the agreement he made to host the most popular charity event every single year that was at that house, because he wanted to be a producer, which he is. So anyways, so I called Burkle, and I go, dude, you want me to charge you double or triple? He goes, what are you talking about? I go, your security is on our ass the whole time when we're working. We can't get anything done. Call off the dogs. Right? I go, what do you think we're just plumbers? And he did. Security was very upset with us. They gave us a stink eye for a couple of days after that. But we were very mischievous, so our goal had nothing to do with doing more work. We wanted to inspect this amazing property and go in every single nook and cranny. So they actually had a miniature-sized house on the property in the backyard that you had to crawl in because it was for children only. They had a working toilet and a working sink, miniaturized. Now, I was in the plumbing business. We never even heard of anything like that before, right? And then we go in certain areas of the house were pretty interesting, certain were weird. But then you go into, just like you see in the movies, those beautiful round libraries in a rotunda, right? And we were looking, and I said to my buddy at the time, I go, hey, Steve, do you see that crack right there in the bookcase? He's like, yeah. He goes, and I said, I bet you there's a secret door behind it. Totally joking, right? So we went over and inspected it, and we pressed on it, and sure enough, it had a magnet thing, and it opened up. And there was a secret door behind it. So we went down, and it went down in the catacombs. And there's a lot of things down there we saw. Nothing that was too weird except the massive stench of cedar, because the walls were lined for 50 feet with actual shoe holders, right? And their excuse was it gets rid of the moths. We later found out cedar is very common to get rid of decaying flesh smell. We later found that out, and at the end there was a door that we couldn't get, and it had a huge door, steel with combination lock. Later on we found out a couple of things, which is interesting. Later on, actually found out that that is one of the places that led to Hefner's place, right? So that made sense. I heard the Getty, but you're the only person that's kind of mentioned the Getty also on top of that. But we did hear about the Hefner. So here's the way God is very mysterious. At least 25 years later, God, is it that long? I think it is. Almost 25, maybe 30 years later, I happen to be doing work for the ex-wife of an incredibly famous singer. And the only reason why I'm not going to name his name is to protect her innocence. Anyways, it turns out that she was good friends with Burkle's wife. And what happened is Burkle got his wish, and they would hold this charity event every year. Well, Bill Clinton would show up to this charity event while he was president. And he told everybody that he was in, what's it, not Martha's Vineyard, but the other one that Carter and everybody else went. Anyways, he told everybody he was at that place. He took off 2 weeks, and as soon as the party was over, Clinton stayed there with Burkle, and the security team 1, Secret Service team 1 left, Secret Service team B came in, and all the young teenage girls showed up. And they always paid for this one lady and the wife and some other ladies to go off to Tahiti, Bahamas, wherever they needed to go for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And this happened while Bill Clinton was in office, so you can only imagine what happened. That's why I mention it, because every once in a while I tell the story and somebody has a connection there. So, craziness.
Yeah, that's how it's done. So my job, I was satanic ritual abuse, but I was programmed to be touched and to deal with it. Just, I would say things to my mom like, "Oh, he's touching me," and she would give me this look like, "Get over there and make them happy, make them happy." And so one of my jobs was to bring more people my age. So when I was 13 years old, my mother arranged for my best girlfriend and I to do this dance routine we were dressed up like hookers. I mean, throughout my childhood, my mother would put bright red lipstick on me, makeup like a street hooker, and then I was required to invite my friends. So you want to bring all these teenage girls in. And I ended up bringing my best friend at 13 who came to one of these Hollywood parties and got gang raped. So that is their agenda. That's how it works. That's how they operate. And so anybody who's anybody in Hollywood, they have different levels. So you have the people who just like to party. Then you have the people who just like to look at the young girls. And then you have the people who drink a lot and they want to hang out at the after party afterwards. And they want to touch the young girls, or they want to have orgies with the young girls after they slip them some pills. So that was what I witnessed with my own eyes. But I've also, the stories that I've heard are just beyond horrific of what has happened. A lot worse than what I've experienced. People say, "Oh my gosh, Casey, I can't believe you went through that." I'm like, that's nothing compared to what my survivors have been through, because they groom them. And so a lot of these young women, they go into this because they're going to become models, they're going to become famous, they're going to get to go to France. That's what they offered me. You're going to be L'Oreal's billboard with your eyes and their mascara. All you have to do is sleep with these two guys. But that was the unspoken part of that. So I was unwilling to do that, so I escaped. But most of these girls, they're either drinking or they get slipped something and they're not able to escape, and then they end up getting passed around. So they start at Hugh Hefner's house and end up at they wake up at someone else's house.
Wow. Hey, real quick, we have to pay for this, so I'm going to really quick show people something I have so much passion about. This is the supplier of the best glutathione in the planet, by far, in my opinion. Why is that? Glutathione is the master antioxidant. What does that mean? That means it actually sends a signal or works with your mitochondria and your immune system to do God's work for you. So this is what's so beautiful about the product, and the testimonials will just absolutely blow you away. What this company Neumi did is they figured a way finally to nanosize, not nanobots, guys. I know we're all conspiracy theorists, but no, they just nanosize, which they made the size of the molecule so small that when you sublingually take it, you can just swish it in your mouth for about 30 seconds to a minute, and it bypasses your digestive system. Why is that important? Very volatile antioxidant, and the digestive system seems to tear it apart. So that's why when people ingest it normally, they don't get much out of it. So they've gotten some results by doing intravenous, but you can spend $1,200 a month and get it intravenous, or you can get it so it assimilates a lot better in your body for like $60 a month. To me, it's one of the best things I've ever seen. I have story after story after story. There's somebody in the chat right now that I know he had a plantar's wart on his foot for 30 years. He wasn't spraying it, he was just taking the sublingually, and it's gone. And there's story after story after story like this. It's amazing. If you have an autoimmune disease or issue, I've heard it does wonders. So that's Neumi. The white bottle is the Neumi spray, which is fantastic because everybody knows I'm 124 years old. So I only look 80, so it's pretty much doing a fantastic job there. And then for the ladies is hers, and I call it hers for him because, oh, my life is so good since my wife's been taking hers. Let me just say that. It's a botanical. She absolutely loves it. It's amazing, ladies. It helps with hot flashes and all those fun stuff. Post-menopause, and even if you're a youngster. In fact, they originally tested this on people that were in their 20s, and the ladies got phenomenal results. All right. I blew through that real quick because I really want to get back to our guests. Oh, by the way, the link is right there on the screen, neumi.com/lherms. All right, Casey, thank you for putting up with me when it comes to that. I appreciate it. So, speaking of websites, you do phenomenal work. Can you tell us what you do, and then we'll talk about your website if we could.
Yeah, my website, the acronym is STAR. So what I do through talk therapy, letting people talk about the things that happen to them, validating their experiences, we allow the star in them to come out so they're no longer a victim and they become a survivor. And so I've been doing this for 29 years, and it is the best thing about my life. I always do this for free. I never ever want a survivor to think that they owe me. I mean, even if they say I owe you a beer, I owe you a hamburger, or anything, I say, no, you don't owe me. And I would love to, at some point, my goal is to eventually have someone who has that on their heart to help people, and who become restraining orders against their abusers, because I'm so closely tied with hundreds and hundreds of family law attorneys as well. So right now it's been very helpful to have both sides, to be working in family law as a career, but to help people on the side. So pretty much I work full time, and then definitely Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights I'm usually on the phone, sometimes for 4 or 5 hours a night, or on Spaces. I was trying to pull people together on X, formerly known as Twitter, but I've become targeted by the throttling and the censorship that goes on there. So they really don't want people like me that are bringing the truth. Yeah.
No, and yeah, of course there is major censoring everywhere. I'm completely shadow banned on X, and I know it's under Elon now. It's supposed to be great, but remains to be seen for at least me, and a lot of survivors like yourself I find out are very targeted, which is kind of disheartening. So you're looking to maybe do this full time, right? So it sounds like you may be looking for a sponsor of sorts that can help you do that.
Yeah, I've received in 29 years, I've received 2 financial gifts, roughly worth about $50 to $60. And so I've never had a sponsor. I've been doing this on my own. So I pay for the website, I pay for the 800 numbers, I pay for keeping the phone lines on, and I pay for my time because it's something that's been heavy on my heart. But ideally, working in the family law field with people that are getting divorced, it just takes a toll. I just celebrated on April 15th, tax day was my 27th anniversary working in family law. And I write federal court documents for people getting divorced, and it pays the bills. But my heart is with survivors. Yeah. So and I love to sing. So what I'd really love to do, one of 2 things, and that is that I would love to be on the Truth Tour, and I'd sing on the tours or any tours of patriots, because it's heavy on my heart. I've been active politically against, just the insanity in the world, and trying to empower people since I was like in the second grade. But to either do something with my voice in tandem and in cooperation with helping survivors, that's what I would really like to do, because they were going to keep me comfortable. They told my son that they saw me doing a live on Facebook begging for hydroxychloroquine, and they said, she's lost her mind, she's a heart patient, don't do that, and don't help her get hydroxychloroquine. But I had already had a plan to do just that, and so I escaped from Hoag Hospital, ripped the IV out of my arm, and then spent 2.5 years smuggling hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, fenbendazole, and chlorine dioxide into hospitals and nursing homes, and going out with my PA and singing on the street corners to let people know that the government's been lying to us and that hydroxychloroquine is safe for heart patients. And now I've been on it for 4 years. So I regularly deparasite now just once a month, and I do intermittent fasting so that I'm supposed.
Yes, and true. Oh, go figure. What are the odds of that? So it's. I love the fact that you became a warrior and decided to get HCQ and ivermectin to people. Completely against, of course, the narrative, which I appreciate, and we definitely need more Casey's out there. So I have a couple final questions and some comments. Just a fun one, because it's on people's mind. Was the Casey and the Sunshine Band created before or after your name?
Oh yeah, I'm not associated at all, but I picked up my nickname, Casey Sunshine, because I raised my 5 sons in Florida. So I was Casey and the Sunshine Boys. And I did have a band, but that was not the name of my band. But it is really catchy. Like, people remember the name, but my last name is Emery, as I mentioned. I'm not hiding my true identity. I am a warrior, and I became a warrior when my kids got muscular dystrophy, and the doctors really didn't know how to treat them and didn't even have a diagnosis for them until 2001. So they recognized that my oldest son had something that was unusual about the way he was walking, and suspected that he might have muscular dystrophy. They tested him for muscular dystrophy. It came back negative. So they did a muscle biopsy and determined that his dystrophin levels were normal, and which is dystrophy. Muscular dystrophy is a dystrophin irregularity, and his was normal, and he came back negative for muscular dystrophy. So this pathologist said, I have tested your son's muscle every which way I can, and the only thing that I can find wrong with him is a carnitine deficiency. So I started feeding all 5 of my kids who do have Emery-Dreifuss muscular dystrophy red meat on a regular basis, and my other 4 boys appear totally normal, have some muscle wasting, and they all have defibrillator pacemakers like me. But my oldest son, who was deprived of red meat for the first 5 years of his life, is the only one that's severely disabled, and he's been in a wheelchair since he was 16. So suffice it to say that I was a mama bear and a warrior back then when I realized they lied to us about that, because by the time I found out that it was Emery-Dreifuss muscular dystrophy, it was 2001, 9/11 to be exact. My son was going in for his pacemaker surgery, and he saw the second plane fly in live. So yeah, there's just a lot of overlapping corruption that once you add it all together, it's like, what? So.
Do you feel like you were placed in this time by God Almighty Himself to make sure that you see and experience these things so you could help others?
100%.
Yeah, I feel
100%. Praise God. I mean,
yes.
My oldest son and I, because he had 19 orthopedic surgeries, and that doesn't include like the multiple pacemakers, and he and I are very close, and he fell into Satanism because of my brother, who is an avowed Satanist in Hollywood now, who has an award-winning podcast for atheism and attacks anybody who has any faith, and edited The Aristocrats that went all the way to Sundance with all of our most famous comedians that are literally depicting a joke where they come in and they say they bring their family and their dog and do a scene before a talent scout, and it involves bestiality, rape, and incest, orgies in Hollywood. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
That is, yeah, it's the worst. Now, that being said, oh, real quick, by the way, if we don't do the Truth Tour anymore, but I may be having a massive event coming up, and I say may to my wife because I'm not making any commitments whatsoever. We'd love to have you sing there. Um, in regards to that, though, I've been kind of hinting people we're working at something on in the background, and it's a beautiful song. I'll just say this, folks, it's kind of in the genre of We Are the World, only kind of uniting everybody. That's the only hint I'll get, and we have some amazing singers on there. So hang on after we're done here, and I'll talk to you about that because that's really really cool, and love to get you on that. Um, okay, now this is going to be the whole white hat conversation, real quick. To me, it feels like there are actually actors that have been taken off the map. Do you believe that to be true?
Yeah, and I could tell you firsthand. I'm here in Newport Beach, California, and Hollywood's a ghost town.
Yep.
Yeah, it's they took most of the Hollywood people off the streets, and so, but the bad part is that now it's just covered in homeless people. So my oldest son lives in North Hollywood. I go up there to visit him, and you're going to get accosted by people who've lost their mind. I think they're on their way to the zombie apocalypse because
Yeah.
it's beyond comprehension. And the restaurants that used to have lines out the door and stuff like that, no, they're just barely hanging on.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Good. So we hear the exact same thing, and I've disclosed many times. It's very clear that it's all CGI in the movie business now, anyways. And there's actually contracts that several actors, I can tell you one for sure, 100%, because we saw it, have actually signed saying you can use my CGI image and I'll never have to act again. By the way, folks, don't be shocked. Bruce Willis is that guy that actually signed that contract, and it's not an accident that he was averaging one movie every 2 years, and now he's averaging 8 to 10 in 1 year. Why do you think that is? You are not watching an actual person acting. Wow, is that a conspiracy theory? Yes, but there's some fact behind it. And I've heard there's somebody in the chat that I know very well is very familiar that other actors have signed these same agreements. So the good news, guys, is we're going in the right direction, but we have to slowly wake people up. And wow, Casey, you've been phenomenal at doing that. I'm sure I'll have you on in the future, and we're gonna talk moving forward. Um, I believe I may have a way to help you with your vision here too. So we'll talk after we get up. We've been showing up your website over and over again all day in the chat.
I was going to say also you can find on my Twitter, I'm Casey Sunshine Pro Singer, and at the very top is my website, and also my video that I did on Satanic Hollywood. It's a 36-minute video that was aired in the UK to an audience of 53 million in cooperation with Sean Stone. That's Oliver Stone's kid. And so we are getting the word out. People are waking up, and so anybody who I'm also thinking about doing some seminars to educate in general, because now we're all trauma survivors. So yeah.
And your handle on Twitter again is Casey Sunshine Pro Singer. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's also at Kailea Christian. So yeah, I can.
Can you spell Kailea for us?
Kailea is Kailea, and then the word Christian. It's actually Kailea Christiana, but I ran out of letters, and it just turned out beautifully.
It did. Yeah, it did.
Yes.
That's awesome. And they just put it up. Man, you guys are good. Before she even finished the sentence, it's already up in the chat. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Thank you to all our admins. Thank you for Lisa in the background. And thank you to my wife's friend, Annie, who I also know a little bit, and she hooked us up with Casey. Appreciate that. Annie is an absolute doll. And I know one of my friends is in chat. Alan Fountain is a friend of Annie's also. So very, very cool. Casey, thank you so much. Hang on here. We're going to play out an outro song that I kind of helped produce some of the music, but Lisa did the video on there, and it's just absolutely incredible. So we'll run with that, and we'll be with you in a couple minutes. God bless everybody. Thank you very much. Please click on all of Casey's links. And tomorrow, Robert has a special interview on this channel, same bat time, with the Ludlows, which are going to expose a lot in the pet industry and something else, which is very, very cool. He's asked me to drop by, or they have, and I will do my best to drop by tomorrow, although I have a very busy schedule. But I love We the People, so I'll probably be there. All right, Lisa, let's roll the outro.